The weekly household collection was introduced last October and collected waste such as paper and glass for recycling. The service ran into problems when the contractor failed to provide a regular service at the low cost he tendered to win the contract. The council took over the collection but now say it is not economically viable.
That it's going to cost the people in Newcastle $750,000 to do what we're doing now. That's on top of whatever we get back. So that is, in my view, too dear. So we've got to look at another way.
Council is calling for both the state and federal governments to drop the 21% tax levy on recycled paper.
Well, that tax has got to be taken off the recycled stuff to give us half a chance so it is cost effective.
With the possibility of discontinuing the collection service, other options are being considered.
But what we're going to do is change our emphasis so that we're not just picking up things and costing a lot of money. We will be looking at the government to make it so that we can, not only for us, but the whole of New South Wales and the whole of Australia, we can get on with a sensible recycling system.
Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
The crowd of about 50 at Walker's restaurant will pale into insignificance when the festival hits Taree. Up to 5,000 people are expected in October for the first Manning Valley Country Music Festival. A hot lineup of stars will travel to the Manning for the event.
Well, at the moment we've got artists coming up from Sydney for our Sunday concert. There'll be Darcy Lier will be there. There'll be Rosemary Ray and the 38th Flyer. They'll kick the thing off. Brian Linton hopefully will be here, and we're negotiating with several big artists, including Gina Jeffries and Lee Kernaghan.
Not least of the stars will be 17-year-old Gloucester musician Clint Beattie. He belted out some tunes last night, showing why he won a Star Maker Award at the Tamworth Country Music Festival this year. The festival will start on September the 30th and will continue for the long weekend until October the 3rd. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News. The Red Cross Cavalry was flying its flag high in Kempsey this morning. More than 10 riders were on a mission to raise money for a new Kempsey office for the organisation.
Red Cross really appreciates it, and you're doing a great job for your own town as well. We hope that this good weather lasts, and we'll look forward to seeing you in Willawarren.
And so the convoy kicked off on its roadside journey. Cars steered clear of the procession, which included a horse-drawn carriage. To take part in the event, entrants had to raise at least $50 in sponsorship. Organisers said $5,000 was raised from the day's event, going a long way to building the $140,000 office at Kempsey. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News. Clean and powerful waves up to 2 metres high provided the playing ground for competitors. Nora head surfer Glenn Winton retired from the professional ranks last year, but the competition bug still bites at the talented goofy footer.
It's been pretty good. I've been just shaping, going in some contests. I'm trying to avoid them, but I find I'm going in contests a lot.
He competed in both the senior men's and open division. In the white, PD Pirates surfer Mark Tickle pushed hard to keep up with Winton in this semi-final of the senior men's. However, Winton, a former world top 10 ranked surfer, executed a series of manoeuvres on this wave to clinch the heat. Apart from cameo appearances in local surfing contests, Winton has a grand plan of building Australia's first wave pool.
It'll happen one day, but it's just like a wave I can make relatively cheaply that people can enjoy 24 hours a day.
These children enjoying the sunshine at Maitland Park are the unfortunate victims of the condition called Tourette's. It's a lifelong involuntary movement disorder that can cause facial twitches and uncontrolled shouting, which can include swearing and barking.
Well, there could be rapid eye movements, blinking, grunting, snorting, vocal sounds.
A support group of parents from across the Hunter organised the day to help make more people aware of Tourette's. Most of the community is ignorant of the syndrome, which often results in sufferers being ridiculed for actions they can't control.
They are looked at in an odd way, and of course they can't explain why they do these things, especially if it hasn't been diagnosed at the time.
The nature of the syndrome makes life difficult for parents, but the hardest part can be trying to get a correct diagnosis of the condition.
There were very regular visits to the doctors, and lots of doctors showed disbelief in the things that you said and just put it down to normal behaviour, maybe with a little bit of hyperactivity, and go home, don't worry about it.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. It could have been the 1800s in the Hunter Valley town of Morpeth, the costumes, the crowds, the terror. Ned Kelly was making a comeback to hold-ups after a century-long break, but the long arm of the law made sure it was a brief return. Captain Thunderbolt led the charge by his highway robbers, but there was no escape for the gang. They were brought before a kangaroo court at the Royal Hotel and found guilty. And there was only one verdict by organisers on the future of the festival. It'll be back on again next year. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The eerie sounds of marchers on the move in another Anzac dawn. War veterans carried personal recollections of mates lost in battle and those who've fallen out since. Dawn services were well attended throughout the region. Veterans gathered their strength for the big march of the day and the chance to catch up with old comrades.
It's 40 years, I think, since I've marched here, you know.
Fresh faces filled some of the gaps in the ranks, medals proudly worn to keep alive the memories. Adam Lyle marches with his pop, a veteran of Korea.
He marched on behalf of my mate who's deceased, so he's wearing his medals on behalf of him.
Why do you march today?
Oh, just because I'm proud to be with Dad and march with him. I've always done it, so it's really nice to sort of be with him and be proud of him today.
Carolyn Ferguson marches with her dad Wilf. The Reserve Army and War Widows Association joined the Newcastle March.
It's the first time we've been allowed to march in this march in Newcastle.
I wanted to march. I wanted to march.
5 brothers, and we lost 3 of them during World War II.
Newcastle's David Bernard paid personal tribute to his brothers, and a handful of remaining World War I diggers answered this year's call. Andrew Lobb reporting from Civic Park in Newcastle, now across to Jodie McKay in Maitland. But that's not Jodie McKay.
Situated behind Port Waratah Coal Services Administration Building, 7.5 hectares have been set aside for the $500,000 project.
This will mean the formation of a small lake area, planting of appropriate reed species and other dense plantings, and creation of some small islands.
According to Philip Hughes, the company's current expansion program has reclaimed some of the existing low-lying wetland locations. But with advice from the National Parks and Wildlife Service, the natural ponds, with a little man-made assistance, will return.
It should be identical to many of the natural habitats which still exist around the Newcastle area.
Around 169 species of birds inhabit Kooragang Island, but that number has dwindled over the past 3 decades. Come springtime, it's hoped the new home will become a permanent one.
This is the time that the birds return to the Newcastle area, so we hope that they'll have a nice, pleasant home for their use come next spring and summer.
The lush green surrounds of Maitland Park, which dates from the 1800s, is used by more than 300,000 people a year. A plan unveiled by Maitland Council could see the number of park users increase, with the addition of 16 hectares south of the existing 30-hectare site. The Australian rules field will be turned into parkland, with another football ground established further south, along with 2 cricket ovals. There would also be more netball courts in Council's bid to attract further sports competitions to the city. Councillors met with residents of nearby houses that would be swallowed up by the expansion.
We had some hostile reaction and we had some positive feedback after that meeting.
The expansion would take at least 10 to 15 years, with the redevelopment of the existing park to cost $500,000 and the extension up to $1.5 million.
I think it's an investment in the future of Maitland. It provides Maitland with a park which is also one of the major parks in the region already, with a high-class recreation facility both for all the residents of not only Maitland but the Lower Hunter Valley.
The plan will be on public display until June. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. A Sweeney family get-together usually means a practice session at this Newcastle suburban archery range under the watchful eye of coach Peter Smith. Ray and his wife Marie and 11-year-old daughter Louise are shooting to become the best archers in the world. Ray returned to the sport 4 years ago and his family followed.
My husband shot and I got sick of sitting in the car, so I shot too.
They've since picked up a swag of state and Australian titles, their next mission the World Championships in England in August. Marie will go as part of the Australian team, along with fellow team member Scott Buscombe. Ray and Louise will enter as individuals in the titles. It'll be the first World Championships for all 4, but probably only the first of many for young Louise.
She's got one of the brightest futures, but at the present we're not pushing her. She's just letting her go at her own standard. You know, she doesn't work as hard as what the rest of us. She only shoots when she feels like it.
For residents living near a smelter plant in the Bullaroo Argenton area, possible lead levels and their effects in free-range chickens became a growing public health concern. Could the substance be absorbed by animals, in particular chooks? In an effort to find some answers, the Public Health Unit studied 3 flocks of backyard chickens.
One was a control flock which was situated out of Madawi, and the other 2 were in Argenton and Bullaroo.
Researchers tested the amount of lead in the chicken's bones, flesh and eggs. While results from the isolated flock at Madawi proved negative, traces were found in the others.
There was certainly a significant amount of lead in the blood, but the amount which was deposited in the flesh, which we normally eat, and in eggs was satisfactory.
Dr John Stevenson says the results are not only reassuring for chickens, but for those who consume them.
The other important factor is that there are chickens, of course, raised in many other areas where there is possibly some soil contamination with lead, particularly in other urban areas. And I think it's reassuring to have these results, particularly for that reason as well.
Melinda Smith, NBN News. The vote was open to more than 700 CBD property owners and followed a heated public debate over the controversial issue of raising the benefit levy. Income from the additional rate provides money needed to support promotional projects undertaken by the City Centre Committee. Fierce opposition to the proposed increase came from Derby Street and West End businesses, which argued they gained little benefit, if any, from the levy. But of the 40% of property owners who voted, the majority supported the increase.
It was clear from the eastern precincts of the city centre that the suggestion of varying the rate was acceptable to the eastern precincts. The yes vote there went as high as 70%, and in the Derby Street and West precincts it was clear that they didn't want a variation in the rate.
The draft report recommends the rate should increase to 82%, representing an additional $177,000 in the city centre's coffers. And there's a compromise for the areas which voted against the move.
An increase in the rate in these CBD areas, but leave the rates the same in the Derby Street and West End areas.
Council will be briefed on the report at a special meeting next week. It will vote on the recommendations on May 10. But it will be up to Local Government Minister Gary West to give his final approval before next year's budget is announced. Melinda Smith, NBN News. It's one of theatre's greatest comedies. Set in modern times, it's a battle of the sexes between the 2 leading characters, Petruchio and Kate. The Bell Shakespeare Company has launched its national tour in Newcastle, The Taming of the Shrew, the second production of the season. More accustomed to the stage, this time founder of the Shakespearean troupe John Bell has taken the role of directing the cast of 13.
Everybody, can we have a bit more reaction and ad-libbing this time as it comes in? Very muted that time. Let's go to town on the ad-libbing, yeah?
The production opens at the Civic tomorrow night. It may be the first time primary school girls have been able to try out for the regional soccer side, but there's a feeling it won't be the last.
It's fun to kick the ball around and get goals. You can run around and you're not on a court.
9 zones stretching from Taree to Lake Macquarie took part in today's trials at Barnsley. Only 14 team members will be selected for the regional side to compete in the state titles of Bathurst in July.
Girls soccer has always been a
in a difficult position. There's no organised competition in the Hunter region for primary school age girls, and they've either got to play in the boys' teams or play up in the women's teams. So it's good for them to have an opportunity to play with girls their age in a organised soccer competition, and hopefully we'll see some development in the sport from that.
Gosford Council decided at its meeting on Tuesday night to hold the referendum. At the same meeting, Council also scrapped a proposal to elect the mayor by popular vote.
And most people, quite frankly, couldn't care less as long as Council is collecting their garbage, fixing their roads, stopping their flooding and doing all those jobs. So that comes to election, you're compelled to vote. You think, what name do I know? I know that name that's been seen on every tree, that's been in every paper, that's been on television, that's on radio. I'll vote for that person.
But most councillors agreed that the people should get to choose whether they want the council area split into 4 wards. Although they haven't been drawn up, they would roughly be the Woy Woy Peninsula, Narara Valley, Gosford East and Gosford Centre. If the people of Gosford vote for the new 4-ward system, it will be implemented after the next council election in September. However, Mayor Dirk O'Connor believes it will create bitter factional disputes.
I might make the analogy that that's a bit like having the states run the Commonwealth of Australia. It would be piecemeal, it would be bickering, it would be people fighting for one little thing.
The referendum will be held on June the 18th in conjunction with the council by-election. 2 seats will be up for grabs to replace the recently deceased Brian McGowan and Bob Bourne, who has resigned from council. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
The results of the recent benefit levy vote revealed the concerns of 40% of inner city property owners and retailers. The overall response showed the majority supported the move to increase the rate, allowing the City Centre Committee to use the extra funds for promotion. But when broken down into precinct areas, there was an overwhelming swing against the idea by property owners in Derby Street and the West End. A report recommends these 2 areas be spared the proposed rise, a move that has one precinct leader concerned.
If Derby Street does not go with the City Centre Committee, we run the risk of being isolated and not receiving any of the benefits that that committee does actually do for the city.
Nick Favors supported the rise. Neville Ewer, who owns properties in the West End, was against it. According to Mr Ewer, the city centre budget battle is not over.
We've part won it. I think it's come down from about $1 million to 660 at a glance.
Those opposing the current city centre makeup plan to lobby council and local government minister Gary West for change.
We would like to see the City Centre Committee elected, not appointed by the council, because if it's appointed, how can it be replaced if the vested interest people or property owners don't like what's happening?
What we need is for everyone to sort of have the same vision. Otherwise, we all go off in fragmented directions and nothing will be achieved.
The locos arrived in Newcastle on board the Mirabella yesterday from Vancouver in Canada. This afternoon, the first 90-class engine was unloaded, much to the delight of the more than 80 photographers and film crews on hand to witness the historic occasion. Some had travelled from as far as Melbourne to see the locomotives, the first of 84 new engines commissioned by the state government.
I've seen the steam trains go and the electrics come and the diesels and that, and I just think it's history to be able to see something like this new start off,
The more powerful 90-class locos will be used exclusively in the Hunter Valley to haul coal to the port of Newcastle, while the remaining 55 82-class engines will be used for both coal and general freight.
This is the first of our new 4,000 horsepower locomotives, the largest locomotives ever to operate in New South Wales. They'll allow us to totally re-equip our Hunter Valley export coal haulage fleet and, of course, improve our already very good service to the export coal industry of New South Wales.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Wing Commander Baldwin is a former public relations officer at the Williamtown base. He was transferred to Canberra earlier this year. The Wing Commander was before the court today on 3 discipline charges.
The first and third charges related to behaving in an insubordinate manner, and the second charge related to behaving in an insulting manner.
On the insulting manner charge, it was alleged that Wing Commander Baldwin on November 12th last year told a superior officer, Group Captain John Donoghue, "You're gutless," or "You're a coward," or words to that effect. Over the 4 days of the court-martial, 8 witnesses gave evidence. The court heard from a clinical psychologist who treated Wing Commander Baldwin for work-related stress in the latter half of 1993. Counsel for Wing Commander Baldwin asked the psychologist, was it true to say that Group Captain Donoghue and the Wing Commander weren't getting along? The psychologist replied, to say the least. The court cleared Wing Commander Baldwin of 2 insubordinate behaviour charges but found him guilty of behaving in an insulting manner. While the offence could carry a penalty of up to 6 months jail, the court chose to issue a reprimand. Peter Ryan, NBN News. The Tocal Field Days show is just getting bigger and bigger. This year, 450 exhibitors have set up, more than 130 up on last year. If you've got a few chooks in the backyard, Tocal has what's hot and what's not. And if you like growing a few spuds and tomatoes, all the latest information is right here.
We want satisfied people. That's the bottom line. So it doesn't matter how many come through the gate, as long as when they do leave, they've learned something. It's an educational field day. They've learned something, they're happy with what they've done, and they're better off for being here.
Only 25% of the field day visitors are full-time farmers. Most people are here to get an idea of what's happening on the land, and that may include the suburban backyard. 28,000 visited last year. With clear weather, it's hoped that total will be topped over the next 2 days. Oh, and expect the unexpected. Peter Ryan, NBN News. North Coast in the yellow were defending champions, while Metropolitan South West were unplaced in last year's competition. With many members of the South West District coming from a new school specialising in sport, a marked improvement was evident. The team started strongly, but as the match wore on, North Coast gained in confidence and won the final 3-2. Meantime, across the road at the International Hockey Centre, the Under-15 New South Wales Championships began. Newcastle in the red, white and blue got off to a great start in this game against defending champs Sydney. Teams from the far North Coast, Mid-North Coast and the Tamworth District are competing in the event, which will conclude on Sunday. North Coast, Mid-North Coast and the Tamworth District are competing in the event, which will conclude on Sunday.
Health Minister Ron Phillips wants answers about the escape of 3 patients with a history of violence from Morisset Hospital. An inquiry is underway, according to Area Health Boss Dr Tim Smythe. It will look at how the 3 were able to hail a taxi from the hospital grounds and make their way to Sydney, where they spent the night. The 3 are still at Long Bay Psychiatric Hospital. They'll be returned to Morisset this weekend, where their freedom to roam the grounds is expected to be curtailed.
Pending a review by the Mental Health Review Tribunal, they'll be required to stay in the wards without access to the Morisset campus.
Dr Smythe denies a security breach but says patients' access to taxis on the campus is a concern.
Well, we'll be discussing that with the Newcastle Taxi Co-op to see what we can do, and also having some discussions with Toronto Police.
As for whether people with a similar history of violence will be allowed out on unrestricted leave in future,
we base that on the assessment by the Mental Health Review Tribunal.
the inquiry into the incident should be completed by next Wednesday and a full report sent to Health Minister Ron Phillips. Jane Anderson, NBN News. The spectacle lasted almost an hour. Thousands of litres of water rained on the Chilcott's family home.
It started only just trickling out and then it went boom and it went high, really high.
The family wasn't home at the time but could see the tower of water from a distance.
Thought it was smoke actually when we came around the corner down the back near the oval, and I thought no, it's not smoke, it was too high for water. When we drove around the corner and saw it, it was definitely water.
The Chilcott family was planning to move in 2 weeks and had much of their furniture stored in the garage, which took the brunt of the damage. It's believed a burst water main was responsible. Jane Anderson, NBN News.